In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Veni Sancte Spiritus Rete tuorum corde fidelium et tui moris igneis in accende emite spiritum tuum et creabuntur.
Et non nobis faciem te.
Oremus Deus corde fidelium Sancti Spiritus illustratione recubisti. Da nobis in iodem spiritu recta sapere et eius super consolatione gaudere. Per Christum Dominum nostrum.
Amen.
Sede sapientiae.
Ora pro
In nomine
nobis.
Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, so we're talking about liberalism, how bad it is. So it's something very pernicious and a blasphemous heresy. Dethrones Christ the King. That sounds so nice, you know, but it isn't. So we left off at Article 1, page 64 here. This is all Cardinal B.O. Concerning the fundamental principle of liberalism and its many applications, the liberty of which we are now speaking is not that of which metaphysicians treat, namely the faculty of free will. So we're not talking about that. Consisting in the dominion which the will enjoys over its acts, that is, in the act of indifference by which it can will or will not will. As you know, the libertas exercitii and the libertas specificationis. So the first is you could just not love or hate, just your will stands still. That's the liberty of exercise. If it does elect to do something, it can elect to do one thing or the other. That's specification. If you haven't heard that yet, maybe you have. Let's hope you have. If you've taken philosophy, you should understand that. So there's a liberty of exercise and the liberty of specification. And he's just referring to that. He says, we're not talking about that. That's just free will. Concerning this liberty, which is necessarily intrinsic, which carries with it obligations of conscience and requires us to preserve the moral law, which animals don't have to do. They have no conscience. Conscience, by the way, is not some special faculty of your mind. Rather, it is simply the intellect applying the law to an act which is about to be done. It's an act. It is not a faculty. Very important, because people think conscience, I use my conscience as if you get beams from God into your conscience. No, your conscience is simply the application of the law as you know it to an act about to be done. All right, very important. Liberalism has no care, so much so that most of its adherents are pure materialists, recognizing in man no other principles than those of spontaneous movement according to the instinct and determination of nature. In any case, however, whether they admit or do not admit free will in its proper and metaphysical sense, they do not make an idol of it as such, but instead they make an idol of the faculty of using one's own activity, whatever it should be, without any exterior coercive force impeding its autonomy. That's the key to liberalism. Free as a bird. See, there's no law except what you accept. If you accept it as something that pertains to you, that's fine. You see, and that transfers into the sovereignty of the people, which is condemned by the Roman Catholic Church. See, so you can't make any law unless we say it's okay. That's democracy in the bad sense. This liberty is therefore the liberty from all coercion, not only from coercion considered in itself, which is through violence, and which consequently can concern only external acts, as if, for example, somebody handcuffed you. That's an external violence so that you can't move your arms. We're not talking about that. But also from coercion in the broad sense, which is through the fear of laws by the threat of penalties, through social dependencies and necessities, in a word, through the restraints of any kind. Now remember the Vatican II talk. See, no one should be constrained in any way whatsoever, which prohibit man from acting or being able to act according to his own individual inclination in all things. This is exactly Vatican II. In other words, it's practically they lifted it from yeah, and this is what Bio is condemning, and with right. That's liberalism. It's pure liberalism. They say that such liberty is good because of autonomy. See, auto means oneself. Nomos in Greek means law. You're a law unto yourself. Autonomy, to which all things must cede, except only perhaps those things which are required for the purely material order in society. Remember what Vatican II said, within due limits. So, for example, if you got into your head that you should, like this guy that shot the executive of United Healthcare, you see, they'd say, well, that's a little bit overboard, but he got into his head that this is something he should do. He was following his conscience, and he was happy about it because he thought the guy deserved it. See, so, but again, how do you put a limit on conscience? If you say you have freedom to do whatever you want, who's to decide what is? He could say, well, I'm protecting the common good by killing this man. Because he could probably did, make some sort of good out of it. It is that excellent good for the preservation of which all things must be subordinated, meaning this liberalism, and which is the necessary foundation of all social construction if it be held to the norm of goodness and justice. That's Vatican II. The fundamental principle of liberalism is in itself absurd, against nature, and imaginary. In other words, it's detached from reality. From the beginning, I say that it is absurd inasmuch as it places the principal good of man in the lack of any bond which would in any way coerce or restrain liberty. For the good of man is understood only in two ways. Either it concerns the end or the means toward the end. So something is good either as an end or it is good as a means toward an end. So a good road or a bad road, given the end of arriving at a certain place. In which place, I ask, does one place liberty? Not in the first, I think, in other words, in the end. Because this is so because whatever one wants to assign as the notion of the end, you would certainly concede to me at least that liberty cannot be that end. For liberty is a certain potency or faculty, and every faculty is because of something else. See, a faculty is the ability to do something. So your eyes are a faculty, your ears are a faculty, your hands and feet are a faculty, your intellect is a faculty, etc. They are made to do something else. That's the whole purpose of their existence. So imagine if you always kept your eyes closed. People would say you're sick. There are some people that keep their eyes closed a lot, but in other words, a faculty is for something else by its very nature. That's what he's saying. So you can't make as an ultimate end something that is made for something beyond itself. Do you understand that? Does that make sense to you? Okay. So, for liberty is a certain potency or faculty, and every faculty is because of something else, at least in regard to operation, which again, while we live on this earth, consists entirely in seeking of some good, whether true or apparent. So all of your faculties are there to seek some good, whether a true good or an apparent good. Like, it would be good to rob a bank because then we would be rich. It's true. You'd be rich, but it's not good to rob a bank. But it's seen, because there is some good aspect of it, it is posited as something to be loved and embraced. See, that's an apparent good. I'm using a crazy example, but that's why people rob banks. I mean, they know it's wrong. It's just that there's an apparent good to it. There's a good attached to something wrong. It is absolutely clear, therefore, that the only thing which is left to be said is that liberty concerns those things which pertain to the end, and therefore one must look at the goods which pertain to the end, which even common sense teaches us. St. Augustine divides these into three categories, namely into the highest, middle, and least goods. The reason for this division is obvious. He says that the highest goods are those which no one uses badly. The middle and the least goods are able to be used both by the good and the bad, with this sole difference that the middle goods are still required for a good life, whereas the least good things are not in any way required. The virtues, therefore, by which one lives rightly are the great goods. Corporeal things, however, without which one can live rightly, are the minimal goods. The faculties of the soul, however, without which one cannot live rightly, are the middle goods. So corporeal things are, they're not evil, it's just that they must be always in conformity with the moral law. From this it is clear that free will is in no way among the highest goods, but must be considered to be among the middle goods, because if there is no praise, no uprightness of life without free will, then there is no kind of crime or disgraceful action or harm either of ourselves or another. In other words, there would be no reward of virtue if there is no free will, nor is there punishment of crime if there's no free will. Luther, by the way, denied free will. See, that's why animals do not go to jail. They are not hauled before judges and lawyers and whatnot. This cat ate a mouse. Because they don't have free will. Or this cat pulled down the curtains. It was just trying to sharpen its claws. What can you expect? See? But where there is free will, there is morality, and that means there is both virtue and sin, crime and punishment. For this reason, liberty needs constraints lest it fall into the precipice, and to the extent that it is held by more efficacious reins, so that which is ordered in itself, the better will be its condition. So in order that free will function properly and elect the good, lest it end up in jail, you need something to direct it, which is the law. So obviously the law is higher than the free will, because the law indicates the good end. So the free will cannot be the highest of the faculty, or the highest thing to be desired. You can do whatever you please. So whoever denies this, however, by assenting to the fundamental principle of liberalism, that free will is the highest good, must necessarily fall into one or the other of these absurdities, Either he will impudently affirm that liberty in this life is indefectible, that he can only elect the good, or he will not fear to assert that it would be good, even the best, that there be preserved in a holy and inviolable way for this defective liberty as an unimpeded use of its defect in regard to all things. In other words, if I want to do what I want, that's fine. I can do whatever I want. You see, as he would affirm the indefectibility of his will. In other words, if I want to do something bad, I should be able to do it, because the exercise of my free will is the highest good. He says, what is this but the highest form of dementia? Insanity. But that's again John Locke. And he said the only constraint is that you not impede the exercise of the self-will of someone else. But this is only the beginning of the dementia. There is a further progress of it in what they add, that all things must be subjected to the good of individual liberty. For this reason, all those things are inimical and contrary to human perfection, which in any way limit or impede individual liberty. So government, they would say, is a necessary evil. I've heard this. It's a necessary evil. It really doesn't need to exist except to keep people away from strangling each other. Because due to social necessities, it is clear that many fetters are placed upon this same liberty. It follows that the ideal condition of man is found in an asocial state, that is, one where there's no other people, in which there reigns a law of pure and perfect individualism. I can do whatever I please, and any social constraints are in themselves evil. A lot of that in the American culture, individualism. A lot of it. I mean, this is all 18th century stuff. This is Rousseau and all of the others. I mean, Rousseau said the ideal state of man was when he was in the forest, and then society happened, and we're constrained by society. That's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a nut, an immoral nut. And this indeed was the monstrous conception of the revolution, and he's referring to the French Revolution, but that is sort of the embodiment of all revolutions, was that one, and of its philosophers, who also, in order to confirm their abstract theories in any way whatsoever, dreamed up an existence of some primitive condition in which man lived outside of society. This is Jean-Jacques again, accommodating the traditions of peoples to this invention of theirs, whether it be of a golden age, of Saturnian kingdoms, of a paradise of innocence, etc. What do you think this original golden age was? An age of absolute liberty, which more and more declined into a rigid age, to the extent that men more and more coalesced into a society. Do you see the principle of liberalism ending up by itself and with inevitable necessity in those things which are against nature? That's what we see today. So if you're inclined to do that, hey, you can't stop love. That's what they say. How do you put constraints on that? If there is anything evident, if there is anything obvious, if there is anything clearer than the light of day, indeed it is that man is born into a society, that by nature man is social, that the social status of man is the law of life, according as even the mere necessity of corporeal existence declares with exceeding clarity. In other words, you can't live, probably cannot live, period, without other human beings helping you to do so, and where you're helping them to do so. You know, why is the supermarket there? Because there's a whole bunch of people along the line, truckers, farmers, all sorts of people helping you to pick out something so that you can eat it. All right? So let's say the supermarket doesn't exist anymore. You would see crowds of people roaming the streets, raiding homes for in a desperate search for food. See, or doctors and hospitals and electricians and plumbers. They're very important. That's why I say to young men, hey, we will always need electricians and we will always need plumbers. For as long as human beings exist, they will want water coming out of a faucet and in their toilets too. And another thing that human beings will always need is garbage men. So if you want a steady job, get into sanitation. There will always be a need for sanitation. So, for all other animals, nature has prepared food, hair as a covering, teeth, horns, claws as means of defense, or at least speed in flight, while man alone was made without any natural provisions for these things. This is St. Thomas. So, yeah, look at the cat. The cat has great fur. It has claws on all four feet that are like razor blades. And it can smell, it can hear perfectly. It hears things before any human being could hear them and knows where they're coming from. They have stereo hearing. That is, they can tell where something is by listening to sounds. So they can aim at it from listening to sounds. They can see in the dark. They have both speed to flee and they have claws to fight. We don't have any of those things, right? We have lousy smell. We have lousy eyes, except they don't see in color. We have pretty good eyes for that, okay? Because we have an intellect that would distinguish things. Ears, forget it. I mean, you know, they beat us out in ears. Their coats, I mean, women would pay a fortune to have something that looks like an ordinary cat's fur. It's so soft and everything. It's true, they pay a fortune for that. You see? So they are naturally provided with all of those things that they need. They have soft pads on their feet so that you can't hear them when they walk. Everything is there. And it's same for dogs and insects. Everything is there for what they're supposed to do. The mosquito is very light, so you don't feel it until it's too late, till he has pierced you usually. The fly can fly away no matter. You have to really pursue him in order to get him. There's flight. They all have what's endowed with them. We don't have any of those things. We have to put on clothes. We gotta take showers. We gotta do all sorts of things that, you know, you have to change clothes and put on coats. So instead of all these, man was endowed with reason, by the use of which he could procure all these things for himself by the work of his hands. Now, one man alone is not able to procure them for all for himself, for one man could not sufficiently provide for life unassisted. That's why you have shopping malls and Amazon, because other people are producing things that you need. It is therefore natural that man should live in the society of many. Moreover, all other animals are able to discern by inborn skill what is useful and what is injurious, even as the sheep naturally regards the wolf as his enemy. And birds know what berries to eat and what berries not to eat, and that's how you can tell if you're wandering in the forest. If the birds will eat the berries, then you can too. If they don't touch it, then don't eat it. Some animals also recognize by natural skill certain medicinal herbs and other things necessary for their life. Man, on the contrary, has a natural knowledge of the things which are essential for his life only in a general fashion, inasmuch as he is able to attain knowledge of the particular things necessary for human life by reasoning from natural principles. So his reason is everything. But it is not possible for one man to arrive at a knowledge of all these things by his own individual reason. That's why we need RFK. In other words, he's going to protect the food. I hope he does, because there's a lot of junk in the food. That's why we get an awful lot of organic things here. It is therefore necessary for man to live in a multitude so that each one may assist his fellows, and different men be occupied in seeking by their reason to make different discoveries, one, for example, in medicine, one in this, and another in that. That's St. Thomas Aquinas. None of these things, however, deters the dreaming sophists. That's B.O. again. In other words, these things that are so obvious, the philosophers of the 18th century didn't think about. But if the fundamental principle of liberalism begins with the absurd, if it progresses into those things which are contrary to the very evident intention of nature, what must be said of the imaginary things which it has provided and predefined in social matters by way of a norm or directive idea. So, for whether they like it or not, there is a necessity to live in society, and for better or for worse, there is now no return to that happy primitive state in which man lived as a child of the forest. In the 18th century, when they you would hear of American Indians, the people in Europe thought, oh, this is wonderful, these people that live in the forest, or they live in the state of nature. Read Saint Among the Hurons, and you'll see what the state of nature is. And in Brazil, they won't. There's these people, these primitive peoples in the forest, and they should be left alone. They should not be disturbed in their primitive state. So it became necessary for them, therefore, to be concerned about that construction which would leave intact the idol of liberalism and would join two things together which could have perhaps seemed incompatible, namely individualism and the social organism. See, so we can't go back to running naked in the forest, so we have to put individualism together with a social organism. This involved work and labor, but there was nothing hard for the ideologues, nothing difficult for them who build in the air. You can see how much he hates this. Liberalism is all prepared to show you a society conformed to the rule of goodness and equity, namely that which arises from what they call the social contract. Because if society is in no way natural to man, in fact, if it is positively against the intention of nature, to the extent that it is opposed to the inalienable right of liberty, there is no other way to legitimize it, unless it is both something drawn from liberty and is artificially constructed for the supreme end of keeping liberty intact, as its express purpose and function. So any sort of socialization has to come from an act of free will. That's what he's saying. As you know, that's how he's describing the position of the liberals. Posit, therefore, the initial contract by which men come together and agree upon living in common under a government and common law. See, so instead of being something that pertains to natural law, society, it is a construct of free individuals who decide that they want to do this. So you see then that eliminates the society as being the representative of God. Takes God completely out of government and society. See, if it pertains to natural law, society, which is the Catholic Church would say, then obviously it is God who, the authority of the state comes from God, and St. Paul is clear about that. All authority comes from God. That's a quote from St. Paul. Posit especially the conditions of such a contract which correspond exactly to the intended end and to the will of the contractors. The will of the contractors, however, is not one of renouncing liberty, but only one of joining together their individual liberties in order that a total liberty may be had from the union of their individual liberties together. It is liberty alone which is sought, which is conferred only in common because all things are from liberty, through liberty, and for liberty. The differences, therefore, which one man might have from another have no value in society, whether natural or historical dependencies, or familial or national necessities, or the diversity of intelligence, aptitude, education, culture, rights, which are called acquired, and anything else of this kind. So those don't count in the formula. Everybody's the same. Okay? For all these things are entirely extraneous to the matter of the social contract. You are just an individual, whether you are a prostitute or you are, say, a saint. You are both the same when it comes to the social contract. You have all of the virtues that you might have or any kind of accomplishments you might have don't count. You are just like a bag of marbles. You all look the same. That's socialism. But socialism comes from liberalism. The only thing that matters is the application of liberty, and nature has given to each and every man an equal liberty. For this reason, it is necessary that all men are in all respects equal in society. The number of voters will equal the number of individuals. If they are unanimous, there is nothing better. If they are not, then the greater number, 1/2 + 1, expresses the general will, and by expressing the general will, expresses as well the general liberty. You see, so this amassing of liberty decides what is the liberal thing to do, even if it's only one, a majority of one. This is the law of the state, reduced to the rigorous principles of philosophy. Isn't it a wonderful thing? This is what runs. This is what runs the entire planet, pretty much. This principle, yes.
Could this be read as a sermon for the 4th of July?
Well, people wouldn't understand. That's why I'm explaining some of the things he's saying to you. But the principles could be, but it would take more than a sermon. It would take a number of conferences, really, but I hit on that quite a bit. That yes, we should be loyal to our countries and everything like that. But on the other hand, you have to understand the flaws of modern thinking and modern politics and everything that is being said here, that there are flaws and serious flaws. See, that the life of an unborn baby should be left to the principles of liberalism is absolutely horrifying as it is absurd. Or to 9 judges on the Supreme Court. It's horrifying. So as many, and you see all the immorality today, which is done in the name of liberty. Gross immorality. However, perhaps you do not recognize it as so admirable that in so many lights of philosophy there is a complete and perfect notion of fantasy. There are principally 2 things which pertain to a chimerical, that means imaginary, system. The fact that it does not conform to reality, and that it is composed of those ideal elements which by no means are united toward the same end, but tend instead toward its destruction and ruin. It is easy, however, to see each of these things in the system of liberalism. First of all, this system certainly does not conform to real men existing in flesh and blood. And that's always a test of philosophy. Philosophy has to conform to experience. If it doesn't conform to experience, then it is junk philosophy. It has to explain experience, concrete experience. Otherwise, it's just garbage. You know, Hegel, there's a zeitgeist, there's a time spirit that runs everything and brings, makes necessary everything that happens. And that's what animated Hitler and all of that stuff. Well, Germany has to win because we have the zeitgeist. Well, you know what happened. And he also said that he was disappointed that his students still thought that the principle of contradiction actually was true. Principle of contradiction is something cannot be and not be at the same time. That's the principle of contradiction. Something cannot be and not be at the same time. So you can't be a cow and not a cow at the same time. And he was disappointed to understand that his students still thought that that was true. This is the philosophy, this is the sickness of the modern world. Take the single social element which is here assumed as a basis. This element is the individual man, and indeed stripped of differences of place, time, origin, nationalities, of all bonds, whether religious, familial, corporate, or political, up to this very day, consequently either created or admitted for natural or historical development. So maybe he evolved from a monkey. Man is neither modern nor ancient, neither occidental nor oriental, neither father nor son, neither young or old. In a word, man is always the same unto himself, in all individuals, always equal, having neither more nor less the faculty of reasoning and of acting freely. See, that's where you get DEI. See, everyone is equal. So, if I can be whatever I want because I'm equal to everybody else, and it would be wrong to say that perhaps certain races are better at things than others. For example, the Orientals are far better at playing instruments than Europeans or Americans are. They take over orchestras because they're so good at it. I mean, they have a something about them that is very, very talented, and so they are Yo-Yo Ma. It's a great cello player. But that's what Father Cicada said. He knew some musicians, and he said the people from well, you can't say Orientals anymore. You have to say the Asians. The Asians are taking over the orchestras. No, that's taboo to say Orientals, even though they are from the Orient. But that's taboo. So you have to say Asians. Asians are taking over the orchestras. I mean, they have they blow away everybody else. And it's definitely true that black people are stronger and more athletic than any white people. Almost. That's their natural talent. It's absolutely true that men are stronger than women. That's why when the transgenders compete, they always win, because even the best of the women cannot swim as fast as a man. Or that transgender that beat up a woman, what was it, in the Olympics? It was a transgender, I think, a man that became a woman, and he beat up a woman in the ring in about 2 minutes or less. It was awful. It's just, there's a lot of diversity. There is diversity, but the diversity should be respected in the sense that you should be put in the place where you belong, according to your talents and your abilities. That makes sense. And it's good that there is a diversity, because some people are better at things than others. I mean, some people are very endowed with regard to computers and everything that concerns that. Other people, I mean, I can hardly distinguish it from a typewriter. I mean, you tell me anything about the computer, I have no idea what you're talking about. As long as the thing works. By the way, mine is not working so well lately. So I have to get a new one, and but it's almost 6 years old, which I think is kind of old age for computers. But it has given good service. But anyway, so it will go to the great computer land in the sky. Not really. I keep my old computers because there's things on them that I drag off. But anyway, no, it's true. I mean, some people are just endowed. Some people are endowed for mathematics. Other people are endowed for music and art and whatnot, and philosophy. The diversity is very good, because people will contribute according to their talents and according to their abilities. And there has to be a certain grade. There has to be people who are very bright, who do everything that pertains to intellectuality, you might say, and people who are less bright, who will do the hard work. As one man said to me, somebody's got to dig the ditches. It's true. Somebody does have to dig the ditches. And that's important for society. If we didn't have any ditches, we wouldn't have septic fields. And then what would happen. And certain people are just made for that. They know what to do. They're made for working with their hands. And that's extremely important for society. Imagine if everybody were a computer geek. Imagine what life would be like if everyone were a computer geek. Garbage would be in the streets. There's that diversity is very important, but each one in his own niche. Let's see. So in other words, he's saying that the system doesn't work; it doesn't conform to reality. But this man, this universal man that is equal in all things, he says, if you look at the bottom of the paragraph, but this man is a type of second intention. Second intention means a construction of the mind. This is a logical man. This man resides in the Porphyrian tree. In logic, that's the level of abstract concepts. See, he's saying this is a purely conceptual human being. Nobody exists like that. And not in the order of reality. And if he does not exist in the order of reality, neither will the fantastical system exist in the order of reality which they have concocted for its use. So the idea of equality in the sense that a leveling equality, which liberalism demands, is absurd. That's his point there. It doesn't conform to reality. That's why in every society there is always an aristocracy, and there's a low class, and there's a middle class. An aristocracy always rises above in various ways, either through money or through various other talents. And there's always a low class. And that's important that both are there. If there had not been an aristocracy in Europe, for example, we would not have Mozart, we would not have Haydn, nor Beethoven, nor any of the other greats, nor the painters, nor the sculptors. They are the ones that enjoyed those things because they had good minds, they were well educated, and they paid for them. Haydn was paid by a noble in Hungary, Esterházy, for most of his life. He was a paid servant. We would not have him if he had to go, dig the ditch. So, however, the chimerical, that means imaginary, we're almost done. A characteristic of this system is yet more evident in the fact that while it is constructed to keep liberty perfectly intact, it is inclined entirely toward the destruction and ruin of liberty. This is most evident in the case of minorities who are surrendered to the tyrannical dictatorship of the prevailing number, a number even of one, without any defense, without any possibility of recourse. See, the majority has spoken, and that's it. And nevertheless, the ideal society ought to be one in which all individual liberties converge into one, with the result that each man, by obeying the law, is obeying his own will, represented by the law and by the law. That's what Rousseau said, that even if the government goes against your will, you should rejoice because you're doing the will of the government. That's socialism. That's communism. The all-powerful government, this is what the people want, so this is what I want, therefore, because it's the exercise of liberty. That's pure socialism. In fact, not only with regard to minorities, but also with regard to majorities themselves, this very same thing likewise appears at first glance. This is because majorities, since they prevail by arithmetic quantity, do not prevail by reason, or by wisdom, or by an autonomous judgment, nor in any of those things which make men of their own right, sui juris, in other words, would constitute them as independent human beings with free will. Unless someone is totally unfamiliar with human affairs, he will easily perceive that multitudes of this type, if by chance they are admitted to the making of laws, are customarily the prey of agitators, violent people, potentates, in a word, of oligarchies which are born of individualism, which is exactly the government that we have. They subjugate these multitudes and use them as instruments of their own domination for their own interests and their own ambition. Ditto. Therefore, from beginning to end, this much touted liberty, the virtue of the system, is reduced to the privilege of a few potentates. True. While for everyone else there remains either an open oppression or a veiled servitude under mendacious, that means lying, appearance of emancipation. This is the conclusion which a summary examination of the system provides, in order that the conclusion become clearer and more evident as the seriousness of the matter warrants, and in order that it become more and more obvious how dangerous, how harmful, how deadly is the fundamental principle of liberalism. Even in regard to the simple end of civil life, it is necessary to come to its application in particular. So we'll stop there. So we'll see what else he says. So it's important that you understand these ideas. I mean, these because you have, as I said, the Statue of Liberty. Liberty is all of that idea is from the 18th century. It's all this thinking, and that this goddess of liberty, sitting in New York Harbor, and the Liberty Bell sitting in Philadelphia, which did not crack, by the way, when they rang it for the Declaration of Independence. It cracked later, right? But that's the myth, is that it cracked. You know, they were ringing it so hard that it cracked. No, it cracked later. But the Liberty Tree, but that also comes straight from Freemasonry. Freemasonry is the organ. It's like the church of these ideas. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen. Subtuum praesidium confugimus sancta Dei genitrix nostros deprecationis et aspicias et necessitatibus, sed periculis cunctis libera nos semper, vigor gloriosa et benedicta. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen.